Once upon a time, in the vibrant and bustling city of Lagos, there lived a renowned but humble wig stylist named Madame Lamisa. Her shop, Lamisa's Touch, was widely known as a sanctuary for women desperate to restore their old, worn-out wigs. Madame Lamisa's skills were legendary. She was able to breathe new life into the most tired and frayed wigs, transforming them into stunning pieces of beauty that left her customers in awe. The women of Lagos trusted her implicitly, swearing that their wigs looked brand new after just one visit. Her reputation as the best wig revamping stylist in the region was unmatched. Madame Lamisa's shop was always busy, with no less than 300 wigs arriving daily from all corners of the city. However, despite the constant flow of customers, Madame Lamisa adhered to a strict rule. Each client was only allowed to bring one wig at a time, no matter how many wigs they owned. Some clients, eager to have more than one wig worked on, offered to pay double, but Madame Lamisa stood firm. She refused to bend her rule, not even for money. What her customers didn't know was that Madame Lamisa's revamping services were not as innocent as they seemed. There was something far more sinister hidden behind her craft. One day, a customer named Amara, a successful businesswoman, brought her prized, expensive wig to Madame Lamisa's shop for revamping. It was an old wig that she had cherished for years, but its faded color and frizz texture made it look unkempt. Madame Lamisa took the wig with a smile and promised Amara that it would be restored to its former glory. 3 days later, Amara returned to pick up her wig. Madame Lamisa handed her the wig in a plain black bag, reminding her, "Do not open the bag until you are home." Amara, trusting the stylist, agreed. But once she arrived home and opened the bag, a strange chill washed over her. As she laid eyes on the now revitalized wig, she received a phone call. The contract she had been fighting for over the past few months had just been approved. In disbelief, Amara stared at the wig in her hands, an instinctive feeling telling her that it had somehow brought her luck. She couldn't shake the connection between the timing of the phone call and the wig. Delighted, Amara shared her good fortune with her friends, telling them how the wig seemed to have brought her a stroke of luck. Word spread quickly, and soon all her friends were visiting Lamisa's Touch with their own wigs, eager to experience the same good fortune. It wasn't long before whispers of Madame Lamisa's magic reached beyond the circle of friends, and women from all walks of life began to flock to her shop. Each customer who received a revamped wig had a similar experience. Immediately upon opening the bag at home, they would receive shocking and life-changing news. This led many to believe that Madame Lamisa had a special, almost mystical ability to bring good fortune to those who wore her wigs. The line outside Madame Lamisa's shop grew longer each day, attracting socialites, traders, bankers, and even struggling students, all hoping for a change in their fortunes. Madame Lamisa remained warm and welcoming, but she still enforced her one wig at a time rule. Every client would leave their wig in the corner basket, eagerly awaiting the moment they could return to receive their new, lucky wig. But what they didn't know was that Madame Lamisa had a dark secret. Every night, after the shop closed and the last customer had left, Madame Lamisa would retreat to a secret back room in her shop. This room was dimly lit by bowls filled with dark, blood-red water that glowed faintly in the darkness. Madame Lamisa would take the wigs dropped off by her clients and carefully dip them into the water, while chanting in an ancient language. As she chanted, the spirits of the water would rise, attaching themselves to the wigs. These spirits were powerful beings, known to bestow fleeting good fortune upon the wearer. However, this fortune came with a price. After a time, the spirits would turn chaotic, bringing misfortune and ruining the lives of those who had been blessed by them. Amara, thrilled by the luck she had experienced after wearing her revamped wig, became even more successful. She met a billionaire businessman on one of her trips and soon became engaged to him. He showered her with extravagant gifts, including a mansion and luxury cars. Amara's life seemed to be perfect, and she became the envy of her friends. Months passed, and as her wealth and success grew, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that the wig was the source of her good fortune. But one evening, While returning home from work, Amara came across a beggar sitting on the side of the road. The beggar's clothes were ragged, and he looked hungry, desperate for food. As she walked past, the beggar called out to her, asking for some help. Amara, with her newfound wealth and success, felt a strange wave of guilt wash over her. Despite her good fortune, something about the beggar's plight struck her deeply. For the first time in months, she questioned the price of the luck that had brought her so much. This encounter marked the beginning of a realization for Amara. The once glamorous life she had built on the back of her lucky wig began to feel increasingly hollow. Deep down, she knew that the success she had achieved was tied to something far darker than she had ever imagined. The question now was whether the cost of her good fortune would eventually catch up with her. Amara decided to give the beggar some money, but she was taken aback by the beggar's reaction. The frail woman, who appeared exhausted and starved, handed the money back to Amara with a serious expression. "I cannot accept this," the beggar said in a calm yet firm tone. "This money carries a darkness that I cannot bear." Amara was stunned and immediately asked the beggar what she meant. The beggar, locking eyes with her, spoke in a low voice, "You have been touched by spirits from the depths." Then, without another word, the beggar walked away, leaving Amara standing there, bewildered. Amara felt her heart race in confusion. She dismissed the beggar's strange statement as nonsense, but the beggar's piercing gaze stayed with her, haunting her thoughts. That night, as she tried to sleep, a restless feeling began to grow. Her head throbbed with a strange heat, making it difficult to find comfort. She tossed and turned, wide awake, her mind unable to rest. By morning, Amara found herself sitting alone in her living room, her eyes heavy with fatigue, when suddenly, a bizarre and terrifying sensation overwhelmed her. In an instant, she found herself submerged deep underwater, unable to breathe. Amara struggled, gasping for air, but the pressure of the water was relentless, pulling her deeper into the ocean's depths. The sensation of drowning felt so real, her lungs burning as water filled her mouth. Just when she thought she couldn't hold on any longer, she jolted awake, drenched in cold sweat. She was back in her living room, gasping for air and confused, but she knew deep down that it wasn't just a dream. Still shaken, Amara tried to convince herself it was just a nightmare, but the uneasy feeling didn't go away. Later that morning, she headed to her office, eager to celebrate the new deal she had just signed. However, when her phone rang, the voice on the other end sent chills down her spine. "You've taken what isn't yours. Now, it's my turn to take it all." The call ended abruptly, leaving Amara frozen. Moments later, she received an email stating that the deal with the company she had just signed had been abruptly canceled. Shocked, Amara replayed the phone call in her mind and quickly tried to call the number back. To her disbelief, there was no trace of the number in her call log. It was as if the call had never happened. Amara's confusion grew as the day went on. When she arrived home that evening, she was horrified to discover that her house had been sealed by the police. The authorities informed her that her billionaire boyfriend had been involved in fraudulent activities, and as a result, all his assets, including the properties and luxury cars he had gifted her, were being seized. Devastated, Amara found herself homeless and in complete shock. Desperate, she reached out to her friends, but each of them seemed to be going through their own crises, unable to offer any help. Feeling completely stranded, Amara decided to return to her old apartment. That night, as she tried to sleep, the nightmare returned. This time, she found herself sinking deeper into the ocean, her head feeling impossibly heavy, as if carrying a massive weight. She woke up again hours later with an intense headache, unable to comprehend the bizarre happenings. The next day, Amara went to the bank, hoping to withdraw some money, but after a thorough investigation, the bank manager informed her that there were no records of any money in her account. All the funds she once had, including the millions she had accumulated, had mysteriously vanished. In a panic, Amara stood frozen, trying to make sense of what was happening when she received a call from her uncle. The news he brought was unbearable. Her mother and brother had died. She asked him how this was possible, and he explained that they had simply gone to sleep and never woke up. Overcome with grief, Amara collapsed onto the cold marble floor of the bank, unable to understand how everything she had worked for had disappeared without a trace. The bank manager offered his condolences, but there was nothing he could do to help. Amara left the bank feeling utterly defeated, having lost everything. She returned to her old apartment, feeling like a shadow of her former self. The once vibrant woman was now weighed down by the overwhelming misfortunes that had befallen her. It all seemed to unravel so quickly after she had achieved so much. As she sat in silence, Amara couldn't help but reflect on the beggar's words and the strange dreams she had been having. She realized that everything had started to fall apart after retrieving her wig from Madame Lamisa. What once seemed like a source of incredible fortune had now become the cause of her darkest troubles. Amara sat there, piecing together the events in her mind, and she knew in that moment that her good fortune had come at too great a price. With this realization, she made a firm decision. She had to confront Madame Lamisa and uncover the truth. Amara arrived at the store late that night, her heart pounding as she sneaked through an open window at the back. She moved quietly through the darkened store, her footsteps muffled by the silent air. As her eyes scanned the interior, she noticed a door at the end of a narrow corridor. Curiosity gnawed at her, and despite the unease settling in her chest, she felt compelled to see what was behind it. As she approached the door, she saw that it was slightly ajar. Slowly, cautiously, Amara peered inside. What she saw made her blood run cold. Madame Lamisa stood at the center of the room, her hands raised as she chanted in a strange, guttural language. The water in a large bowl in front of her bubbled violently, as if reacting to the words she was uttering. From the water, shadowy figures began to emerge, swirling and twisting as they approached a pile of wigs on the floor. The spirits seemed to dissolve into the wigs, binding themselves to the strands of hair. Amara's heart raced as the horrifying truth became clear. Madame Lamisa was using dark magic to attach evil spirits to the wigs. These spirits granted temporary fortune to the wearer, but at a terrible cost, suffering and destruction. Terrified, Amara backed away from the door, her breath catching in her throat. She couldn't risk being caught, but she now knew the awful truth. She needed to expose Madame Lamisa and stop her before more lives were ruined. Meanwhile, Madame Lamisa continued her work, attaching spirits to the wigs that she sold. One afternoon, a university student named Uni arrived at the store with her friend Diola, eager to pick up a wig that she had heard would change her life. Uni was excited to finally experience the fortune that everyone had been raving about. Diola, however, was skeptical and found it strange that Madame Lamisa had such specific rules about when and how the wig should be opened. "Why can't you just open it now?" Diola asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "You paid for it, didn't you? Why does she get to decide when you open it?" Uni brushed off her friend's concerns. "Don't worry about it. It's just a rule. What if the wig isn't mine?" she said with a laugh, ignoring the warning. But Diola's unease only grew as she watched Uni open the bag right there in front of the store. The moment the bag was opened, something horrifying happened. The wig in Uni's hands transformed into a strange fish, twitching and wriggling as the two girls screamed in terror. People gathered around, shocked by what they were witnessing. The fish flopped around, its scales glistening in the daylight, and the crowd murmured in disbelief. Madame Lamisa rushed out of the store, pretending not to know what was happening. "You're not my customer," she said coldly, trying to distance herself from the scene. "This has nothing to do with me." Diola, frustrated and scared, tried to explain, but the crowd didn't believe her. They were too mesmerized by Madame Lamisa's reputation to question her. Meanwhile, Uni, now a fish, struggled for life in her friend's arms. Diola was frantic, calling Uni's sister on the phone and explaining what had happened. But before Uni's sister could arrive, the fish stopped moving. It was dead. When Uni's sister, Achi, arrived, she was devastated to find her sister's lifeless body transformed into a fish. Holding the dead creature in her hands, she whispered in disbelief, "This can't be true." There has to be a way to fix this. But no one could offer any answers. The crowd around the store murmured and pointed, and Madame Lamisa seized the opportunity. "Look at what these girls have done," she accused, her voice rising in anger. "They've come here to ruin my business with their lies. Can't you see they're trying to bring me down?" The crowd, already suspicious of the strange events, sided with Madame Lamisa. She was a successful businesswoman, and people wanted to believe in her magic. As the rumors spread, many saw her wigs as the key to unlocking wealth, success, and happiness. Women flocked to her store, desperate for the good fortune her products promised, ignoring the warnings and strange rules that came with them. Despite the tragic incident with Uni, the majority of people believed it was just an isolated case, fabricated by jealous competitors. Madame Lamisa's popularity grew exponentially. Her store, Lamisa's Touch, became a sensation, not just in Lagos, but across the entire country. Celebrities and influential figures endorsed her wigs, and soon, she was making television appearances, where she confidently dismissed any allegations against her as mere rumors. With her charm and carefully cultivated image, Madame Lamisa won the support of millions, and her business thrived, scandal and all. But as the months passed, women who had used her wigs began to experience unexpected bad luck. Some faced financial ruin, while others saw their lives unravel in strange and unexplained ways. Yet despite these ominous signs, many still clung to the hope that the wigs held the key to a better life, unwilling to let go of their belief in Madame Lamisa's magic. The dark truth behind Madame Lamisa's power was still buried, hidden behind a veil of deception and greed. Amara, however, had learned the truth, and she knew that the time had come to put an end to the dark magic that had ruined so many lives, before it was too late. Madame Lamisa began to make her move. She led Diola and Achi toward the back of the room, where the blood-red bows lay, shimmering with eerie energy. The sight of the floating wigs sent a chill through their bones as they watched the spirits swirl within them, just as Amara had seen that fateful night. The air felt heavy with a dark presence, and every instinct warned them that time was running out. "Remember," the beggar whispered, "if you destroy the bows, the spirits will fight back. They won't let you break their connection to Madame Lamisa without consequences." Diola and Achi nodded, their hearts racing. The fear of what might happen if they failed was almost unbearable, but they knew that they couldn't let Madame Lamisa continue to hurt innocent lives. They had to act fast. With the beggar's guidance, they crept closer to the ritual room. Madame Lamisa was so engrossed in her chanting that she didn't hear the soft footsteps behind her. Her voice rose and fell, summoning more spirits to bind to the wigs, preparing to release them into the world to continue her dark business. The atmosphere grew thicker, and the flickering light of candles cast strange shadows on the walls, heightening the oppressive feeling in the room. The beggar slowly moved toward the blood-red bows that lay in the center of the room. Her hands trembled, but she was determined. "We have to act quickly," she urged in a low voice, "before the spirits realize we're here." Achi and Diola stood just behind her, their breaths shallow. They had come too far to back down now. As the beggar reached out to grab the first bough, a sudden gust of wind swept through the room, and the temperature dropped sharply. The air shimmered with an unearthly energy, and the floating wigs began to twitch, as if they were alive. Before anyone could react, the room seemed to pulse with power, and a voice, low and menacing, echoed through the space. "You dare to defy me?" Madame Lamisa's voice came from the shadows, and in an instant, she turned to face them, her eyes glowing with a fierce light. "You cannot stop what I've started," she hissed. "These spirits are mine, and no one can undo what I have done." The beggar, undeterred, grabbed one of the blood-red bows and yanked it from its resting place. The moment she touched it, the entire room seemed to tremble. The air crackled with energy, as if the spirits themselves were enraged. Madame Lamisa screamed in fury, her hands shaking as she tried to maintain her control over the spirits that were now spiraling out of the wigs, swirling around her like dark smoke. "We have to destroy them," the beggar shouted, her voice rising above the cacophony of whirling spirits. It's the only way to stop her. With trembling hands, Achi and Diola grabbed the remaining bows, tearing them from the ritual table. The spirits screeched as they were ripped away from their bonds, their howls filling the room. But it wasn't enough. The energy from the broken bows surged violently, and the spirits turned on the intruders, their dark shapes twisting toward them like a storm. In the chaos, Diola cried out, "What do we do now?" But the beggar already knew. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small vial of shimmering liquid.
"This will banish them," she said.
It's the only way. As the spirits rushed toward them, the beggar uncorked the vial, releasing a brilliant light that shone like a beacon in the darkness. The spirits recoiled, screeching as the light grew brighter, pushing them back. Madame Lamisa's face twisted with rage and desperation as she tried to summon the spirits back, but they were being driven away by the light, their power weakening. The beggar, with a final, determined effort, threw the vial at Madame Lamisa's feet. The moment it hit the ground, a blinding flash of light exploded, and the spirits were sucked back into the ground, disappearing into the earth with a deafening roar. Madame Lamisa fell to her knees, her eyes wide with terror as the dark energy that had sustained her for so long drained away. For a moment, the room was silent. The spirits were gone, and the oppressive energy that had filled the air seemed to lift. Madame Lamisa, now powerless, stared at the three women, a mixture of fear and fury in her gaze. "You think you've won?" she hissed, her voice a mere shadow of its former self. "You've only delayed the inevitable. The spirits will return, and when they do, they'll have their revenge." But her words held no weight anymore. The damage had been done, and the truth was now out. The darkness that had once ruled over her was gone, and her power was no more. The beggar, exhausted but triumphant, turned to Diola and Achi. "It's over," she said softly. "The spirits are gone, and Madame Lamisa can no longer harm anyone." As they walked out of the store, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon. The streets were quiet, the weight of the night's events still heavy on their hearts. But there was a sense of peace now, a feeling that the nightmare was finally over. And as for Madame Lamisa, her store would be nothing more than a forgotten shadow in the city, the dark magic that once fueled her reign of terror now extinguished forever. The story had come to a close, but its lessons lingered in the hearts and minds of those who had witnessed the downfall of Madame Lamisa. Her name had become a warning whispered in hushed tones, a cautionary tale about the dangers of seeking shortcuts to success and the cost of sacrificing one's morals for personal gain. The beggar, now free from the curse that had haunted her for so many years, found solace in the justice that had been served. She had lived through unimaginable loss and suffering, but the courage of Diola, Achi, and Amara had finally led to Madame Lamisa's downfall. With the evil that had controlled her life shattered, she was able to rebuild her life from the ashes, a new chapter beginning with the knowledge that no one could ever again steal her peace. Diola and Achi, too, found healing. The investigation into Madame Lamisa had weighed heavily on them, but they had persevered, and their actions had not only stopped her, but had also exposed the truth for all to see. As the women who had been affected by Madame Lamisa's evil recovered, they too found new paths ahead, their lives free from the shadow of the woman who had sought to control them. Amara, whose life had once been on the brink of ruin, had her business booming once more. The live stream had turned the tide, and she became a symbol of resilience and hope. No longer afraid to speak out, she used her platform to encourage others to be cautious, to trust their instincts, and to never allow themselves to fall prey to false promises. But amid the ashes of Madame Lamisa's store, the truth remained. The water spirits, once bound to Lamisa's will, had vanished without a trace. Some believed they had returned to the ocean depths, others whispered that they had been freed from their curse, but one thing was certain: the power that had once held such sway was now gone. Authorities continued their investigation, and victims came forward, sharing their stories. No one was left untouched by the horror that Madame Lamisa had unleashed. Her legacy was one of destruction, but it also became a story of triumph for those who had fought back, who had faced the darkness and emerged into the light. As the story of Madame Lemisa's rise and fall spread, it served as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that the pursuit of success at any cost can lead to devastation, and that sometimes the greatest power lies in rejecting the forces that try to control us. The final lesson was clear: never trust too easily, and never let desperation blind you to the dangers that lie ahead. For, as Madame Lamisa had shown, evil often wears a beautiful face, and it's only when we dare to look deeper that we can uncover the truth. And with that, the story of Madame Lamisa came to an end, but its lessons would be passed on for generations to come, ensuring that her dark legacy would not be forgotten.